Aquarius, something is shifting in your life right now. And the strange part is, nothing around you looks different yet. No big news, no dramatic changes, no sudden breakthrough. But your body knows. You're breathing a little deeper. You're not rushing like before. And for the first time in a long while, you don't feel like you're bracing for impact. This isn't excitement. It's not even happiness. It's that quiet moment when your nervous system realizes, I might finally be safe. And when that kind of calm arrives, real financial movement never comes with noise. It comes with silence. So if you're an Aquarius and this already feels familiar, comment, I feel it. Because what's forming now isn't something to announce, it's something to protect. And in the next moment, you'll understand exactly why staying quiet today matters more than you think. And what's interesting is, you didn't try to create this calm. It wasn't a decision. It wasn't a plan. It arrived the way night arrives, slowly, without asking permission, just changing the temperature of everything around you. You might notice it in small, almost forgettable moments, standing in line and not checking your phone, sitting in your car after work and not turning the engine right away, letting a message stay unread for a while, and realizing the world doesn't collapse. For someone like you, Aquarius, that's not nothing. That's a quiet rebellion against years of living in anticipation, of always being 10 steps ahead, of carrying tomorrow inside your chest before today even finished. There's a softness entering your awareness now, not weakness, not laziness, but a kind of internal permission you've never really given yourself before. Permission to not be on alert. Permission to not explain yourself. Permission to exist without preparing for the next problem. And maybe that's why this phase feels unfamiliar. Because you're not fixing anything. You're not improving anything. You're just inhabiting your own life, which raises a gentle question, one that doesn't demand an answer, but lingers in the background of your thoughts. When was the last time you felt present without feeling pressured? Most Aquarians I know learned early how to stay mentally awake, to observe, to adapt, to keep emotional distance as a form of safety. It made you intelligent. It made you resilient. But it also trained your nervous system to expect disruption. So when things finally stop shaking, your mind doesn't celebrate. It scans. It waits for the twist, the hidden cost, the part where it all unravels again. And yet, nothing unravels. The days pass. Your shoulders stay down. Your thoughts don't spiral as easily. You start responding instead of reacting. This is where many people mistake stability for boredom. But that's not what this is. Boredom feels empty. This feels full, just quiet. Like sitting in a room after the noise fades, realizing how much sound you were tolerating without noticing. There's also a subtle emotional shift happening beneath the surface. You're less invested in proving where you're going, less interested in narrating your journey, more curious about how it actually feels to be inside it. And that's not accidental. Because for Aquarius, silence isn't absence. It's processing. It's integration. It's the space where insight forms before it becomes language. You don't need external validation right now. You're recalibrating internally. Letting your system learn a new baseline, one that isn't built on urgency. This is the kind of phase where life doesn't give you instructions. It gives you sensations, a heavier sense of time, a deeper breath, a quieter mind, almost as if something inside you is being gently retuned, like an instrument that's finally settling into its natural pitch. And the beautiful part is, you don't have to perform for this to work. You don't have to optimize it. You don't have to understand it fully. All you're being asked to do is notice. Notice how you're not reaching as much. Notice how some old fears don't feel relevant anymore. Notice how your attention is drifting inward, not out of lack, but out of curiosity. There's a different kind of intelligence waking up in you now, not the kind that predicts, but the kind that senses. And that kind of awareness tends to arrive right before life begins to move in ways that don't need to be chased. So maybe the real shift isn't happening around you at all. Maybe it's happening in the way you're finally learning to stay. At first, you don't even call it exhaustion. You call it being responsible, being realistic, being someone who doesn't rely on luck. You learn to stay upright in storms that other people never saw. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet ones. The kind that happen in your chest at 3 a.m, when no one is watching and nothing is technically wrong. You became very good at carrying weight without showing it, at translating fear into planning, at turning uncertainty into control. And over time, that way of living started to feel normal, not heavy, not painful, just constant. Like background noise you stop noticing because it's always been there. But here's what no one told you. When your system lives in alert mode for too long, calm doesn't feel safe. It feels unfamiliar. Your body doesn't relax easily. It checks for what's missing. It waits for the next demand, the next message, the next thing that requires you to be stronger than you feel. So when pressure finally lifts, even slightly, you don't celebrate. You hesitate. There's a strange emptiness in not needing to fight, a silence where your mind used to stay busy. And in that silence, a question quietly forms. Who am I if I'm not bracing for impact? Because for a long time, survival became part of your identity. Not in a dramatic way, in a subtle one. It shaped how you love, how you work, how you rest. You don't rest to restore. You rest to prepare. And that's a different kind of tired. There's something tender about realizing this. Not sad, not tragic, just honest. You didn't choose this pattern. You adapted into it. Life asked you to be resilient, and you answered. Again and again, until resilience became your default language. But now, something inside you is gently questioning that script, not rejecting it, just softening it. You're starting to notice how often you hold your breath, how your jaw stays tense even during simple moments, how you stay mentally 2 steps ahead of conversations that haven't happened yet. And maybe for the first time, you're not judging that. You're just seeing it. There's a quiet compassion growing in you toward the version of yourself who had to be strong when no one offered support, toward the part of you that learned to self-regulate because it had no choice. This phase of your life isn't asking you to stop being capable. It's inviting you to stop being armored, to let stability exist without interrogating it, to let ease arrive without feeling like it needs to be earned. And that might be the real discomfort. Not the absence of struggle, but the absence of a reason to struggle. Because struggle gave you structure. It told you who you were. It kept you moving. Now without it, you're standing in a softer space, one where your value isn't measured by endurance, one where your nervous system can learn a new rhythm. And it's okay if that feels disorienting. Healing often does, not because it hurts, but because it's unfamiliar territory. So let me ask you something, quietly, as a friend would. When was the last time you allowed yourself to feel safe without explaining why? Not productive, not prepared, not ahead. Just here, breathing, existing, You don't need to solve this feeling. You don't need to label it. You just need to stay with it long enough for your body to realize that this moment isn't a trap. It's a transition. And sometimes, the bravest thing an Aquarius can do is not push forward, but gently let go of the version of themselves that only knew how to survive. There is a different quality to your attention now. Not sharper, not more intense, just quieter. You find yourself listening more than speaking, not because you have nothing to say, but because something inside you is choosing depth over noise. It is the kind of silence that does not come from withdrawal. It comes from alignment. Your thoughts are no longer rushing to be understood. Your plans are no longer asking for witnesses. You are holding things closer to your chest, not out of fear, but out of care. Like you finally learned that not everything grows better in public light. There is a rhythm in you that prefers the dark soil, the unseen phase, the moment before form becomes visible. You can feel something rearranging inside, not a dramatic shift, more like a slow internal turning, as if a compass is quietly recalibrating itself. And for the first time in a long time, you trust that process enough not to interrupt it with explanations. You are discovering a rare kind of power, the power of not needing to announce your becoming. Silence, for you, is no longer emptiness. It is a container. It holds your emerging clarity. It protects the parts of you that are still tender. It creates space for intuition to speak without being rushed by logic. You are learning that some things lose their shape when exposed too early. Some ideas need to be felt before they can be named. Some dreams collapse under the weight of other people's expectations. So you keep them close, not hidden, just incubating. There is something sacred about that choice, because you have spent so much of your life translating yourself for others, explaining your thoughts, softening your edges, making your inner world accessible. And now, you are letting your inner world exist without commentary. You are letting it be complex, unfinished, private. This is not disconnection. It is conservation. Your energy is becoming more intentional, less scattered, less reactive. You speak when it feels true, not when it feels required. You respond when it feels aligned, not when it feels urgent. And the more you do this, the more you notice how many conversations used to drain you. How often you shared things simply to feel seen, even when your body wanted to stay quiet. Now, your silence feels different. It feels alive, like standing in a forest, where nothing is moving, but everything is growing. There is a confidence in not needing to convince, a calm in not needing to prove, a strange relief in not needing to be understood by everyone. You are beginning to trust that what is meant to meet you will recognize you without explanation. And maybe that is the real shift. Not that you are becoming quieter, but that you are becoming more selective about where your voice belongs. Let me ask you something gently. Who are you becoming in the spaces where no one is watching? Because the most meaningful transformations rarely announce themselves. They happen in pauses, in withheld words, in the decision to let something remain unspoken until it is strong enough to stand on its own. This phase of your life is teaching you that growth does not always look like expansion. Sometimes it looks like compression, like gathering yourself inward, so that when you move again, you move from a deeper center. And the silence you are honoring right now is not a gap in the story. It is the place where the story is quietly rewriting itself. There is a moment, almost unnoticeable, when the weight you have been carrying starts to loosen. Not in a dramatic way. No fireworks, no sudden sense of victory. just a quiet release in your chest, like you finally set something down and only then realize how heavy it was. What is coming to you now does not feel like gain. It feels like relief, not the kind that makes you celebrate, but the kind that makes you exhale without thinking. You notice it in small, ordinary ways. Bills no longer sit in the back of your mind all day. Your calendar feels less tense. You stop checking numbers with that familiar knot in your stomach. It is subtle, almost boring. And that is exactly why it matters. Because your nervous system is not wired for chaos anymore. It is learning the language of stability, of continuity, of knowing that tomorrow will not demand something you cannot give. This shift does not pull you out of your life. It settles you deeper into it. Money in this season is not an escape. It is a support beam. It holds your routines in place. It softens your decisions. It gives your mind permission to rest instead of constantly calculating risk. You may not feel richer, but you feel less hunted by uncertainty, and that is a rare kind of wealth. You have lived long enough to know that sudden wins often come with sudden losses, that fast growth creates fast pressure, that what looks like freedom from the outside can feel like captivity on the inside. So this quiet arrival feels different. It does not demand attention. It does not ask you to change who you are. It does not require you to become someone else to maintain it. It simply stays, like a steady current under calm water, not visible, but always moving in your favor. You start making choices from a softer place. You think long-term instead of urgent. You spend less energy bracing for what could go wrong and more energy imagining what could simply work. There is dignity in that kind of ease. It does not inflate the ego. It stabilizes the heart. And maybe that is what you needed all along. Not more money, but less fear around it. Not a bigger life, but a quieter one that actually fits you. You begin to trust that you do not have to outrun your circumstances anymore. You can walk inside them, feel their texture, adjust them gently instead of fighting them. This kind of financial shift does not make you dream louder. It makes you sleep deeper. It does not create ambition, it creates safety. And from safety, something far more valuable grows. Clarity, presence, the ability to choose based on desire, not desperation. Let me ask you something softly. If money stopped being the problem for a moment, what part of your life would finally get your full attention? Because this phase is not about accumulation. It is about permission. Permission to slow your inner pace. Permission to build instead of scramble. Permission to let your future unfold without gripping it too tightly. You are not being lifted out of reality. You are being anchored into it. And in a world that glorifies speed, visibility, constant expansion, this kind of quiet grounding is one of the most radical forms of progress. Nothing explodes. Nothing collapses. Life simply becomes easier to breathe inside. And sometimes, that is the biggest miracle of all. There is a softness in your ambition now. Not because you stopped wanting more, but because you finally understand what more actually costs. You are no longer chasing the version of success that demands exhaustion as proof. You have seen where that road leads, the endless upgrades, the moving finish line, the feeling of always being one step away from enough, and something in you chose differently. You are starting to value what stays, what does not spike and disappear, what does not require constant performance to survive. This season is teaching you that growth does not have to be loud to be real, that progress does not need witnesses, that a stable foundation is more powerful than a dramatic leap. You are learning to recognize the kind of opportunity that does not seduce you. It does not flatter your ego. It does not promise a new identity. It simply offers continuity. And for someone who has spent so much of life adapting, rebuilding, reinventing, continuity feels almost radical. You are no longer impressed by fast wins. You have learned how fragile they are, how easily they turn into new forms of pressure. What you want now is quieter, more subtle, more internal. You want to wake up without that background anxiety. You want your decisions to come from preference, not panic. You want your future to feel like something you are constructing, not something you are escaping into. There is a dignity in choosing what grows slowly, in choosing what can be maintained without burning your nervous system, in choosing a rhythm that allows you to stay present inside your own life. So you begin to notice that your body responds differently to this kind of vision. There is less tension in your chest when you think about it, less urgency in your voice when you speak about the future, less need to prove that you are on the right path. Because the right path no longer needs to be impressive, it just needs to be livable. And maybe that is the deepest shift of all. You are not building a life that looks successful. You are building a life that feels safe to inhabit. You start asking different questions. Not how fast can I get there, but how long can I stay without losing myself? Not how much can I accumulate, but how much do I actually need to feel at ease? Not what will make others admire me, but what will allow me to breathe freely when no one is watching. This kind of wealth does not stimulate your nervous system. It calms it. It does not make you rush. It makes you settle. It does not pull you upward. It roots you downward. So that when the world shifts, when trends change, when uncertainty returns, you are not constantly starting over. You remain. And there is something deeply Aquarius about that. Choosing sustainability over spectacle. Choosing longevity over intensity. Choosing a future that does not require you to abandon yourself. Let me ask you something gently. If no one ever knew how well you were doing, would you still want this life you are building? Because the answer to that question is already guiding your next chapter. You are not reaching for more. You are reaching for what can last. And in a culture obsessed with acceleration, that choice is not small. It is quietly revolutionary. You may not notice it at first. There is no announcement, no visible sign that anything about you has changed. But people feel it. They sense it in the way you listen now, in the way you pause before answering, in the way your presence no longer reaches outward for approval, but settles inward with quiet confidence. Something in your energy has softened and stabilized at the same time. You are not trying to hold space anymore. You are becoming space, and that shift is magnetic. Old names appear in your notifications. Familiar voices check in without a clear reason. Some people are suddenly drawn to your calm, as if your nervous system is broadcasting a frequency they forgot existed. It is not about attraction. It is about recognition. They feel safer around you, more grounded, less rushed. Because your internal pace has slowed enough for others to breathe when they are near you. This is one of the quiet paradoxes of healing. When you stop needing others, others begin needing you. Not in a dramatic way, not in a dependent way. Just in that subtle human instinct to lean toward what feels stable. And this is where discernment becomes part of your growth. Not through walls, not through rejection, but through awareness. You start noticing patterns you ignored before. Who only reaches out when you seem calm. Who disappears when you need space. Who listens to understand and who listens to take. There is no bitterness in this noticing, just clarity. You realize that your role in relationships is changing. You are no longer the one absorbing everyone else's emotional weather. You are no longer translating your boundaries into apologies. You are allowing yourself to exist as you are, without explanation, without justification, and that alone reshapes the room. Some people will feel uncomfortable with the new you, not because you changed, but because you stopped compensating. Others will feel relieved, because your steadiness gives them permission to stop performing as well. And a few will try to attach themselves to your calm, hoping it will regulate something inside them they are not ready to face alone. This is not wrong. It is human. But you are learning something important now. Support does not mean self-abandonment. Connection does not mean emotional labor. Presence does not mean availability at all times. You begin adjusting distance the way one adjusts light, not turning people off, just changing the intensity. You let some conversations stay light. You keep some stories to yourself. You choose when to engage and when to simply witness. And in doing so, you protect the equilibrium you worked so quietly to build. Let me ask you something gently. When someone leans toward you now, do they leave you feeling fuller or slightly emptier? Your body already knows the answer. It always has. This phase of your life is teaching you that stability is not something to give away freely. It is something to share selectively. Because your calm is no longer a resource for others to consume. It is a state you inhabit. And the people who truly belong in your next chapter will not need to borrow it. They will meet you there. They will respect the rhythm you live by. They will not rush your silence. They will not confuse your kindness with access. And you will feel the difference instantly. Not in your thoughts, in your nervous system. This is how your relationships begin to mature. Not through dramatic endings, but through subtle recalibrations. You stay open, but no longer porous. You stay warm, but no longer overextending. You stay present, but no longer responsible for carrying what is not yours. And that is how others feel your growth long before they can name it. Not because you told them, but because your energy finally stopped asking to be needed in order to feel valuable. There is a gentler tone inside your thoughts now. Not quieter because you are avoiding them, but quieter because they no longer need to shout. You notice it in the way problems arrive. They still show up. They still ask for attention. But they no longer feel like emergencies. Your mind does not rush ahead to worst-case scenarios anymore. It pauses. It observes. It chooses a response instead of a reaction. And that is new for you. For a long time, your thinking was shaped by anticipation. Always preparing. Always scanning. Always ready to adapt to what might go wrong. That state kept you sharp, but it also kept you tired. Now there is space between a thought and your body's response. A small breath, a moment of neutrality. Enough time to realize that not every signal is a threat. Your shoulders drop without you noticing. Your jaw softens. Sleep becomes deeper, not because life is perfect, but because your nervous system is no longer on patrol. This is one of the most intimate forms of healing. When the mind stops acting like a battlefield and starts behaving like a home, you are beginning to trust your internal stability, to believe that even if something shifts, you will know how to meet it. Not with panic, with presence. Decisions feel different now. They are not loaded with fear of irreversible mistakes. They are simple choices made from current truth. You no longer feel like every turn in life is a cliff edge. Somehow, without a clear moment of realization, you start experiencing yourself as capable. Capable of handling uncertainty. Capable of staying grounded under pressure. Capable of not knowing and still feeling safe. That is a profound internal upgrade, because the biggest change is not what you are thinking about. It is how you are thinking. Your mind is no longer racing ahead of your body. It is syncing with it. You listen to sensations, to fatigue, to intuition, to subtle discomfort. You stop forcing productivity when you feel depleted. You stop demanding clarity when you need rest. You allow uncertainty to exist without rushing to resolve it. And in that permission, your inner world becomes quieter, not through control, but through trust. Let me ask you something softly. When was the last time you felt truly neutral about a problem instead of immediately stressed by it? That moment is your nervous system telling you a story about safety, about internal resilience, about finally believing that you do not have to stay hypervigilant in order to survive. You have spent years functioning at high alert, interpreting tension as normal, confusing adrenaline with motivation, thinking constant mental activity was a sign of intelligence. Now your mind is discovering something deeper. Stillness does not mean stagnation. It means regulation. Your thoughts are becoming more selective, less repetitive, less compulsive. You stop rehearsing conversations that have not happened. You stop predicting reactions you cannot control. You stop carrying mental weight that belongs to other people. And slowly, quietly, your mind returns to its original function. Not to protect you from imagined danger, but to support your real life. This is what it feels like to leave survival mode. Not a celebration, not a declaration, just a steady internal shift from tension to tolerance. You begin to realize that peace is not the absence of problems. It is the absence of constant inner urgency, and that is a different kind of freedom. One that does not depend on circumstances. One that cannot be taken from you. Your mind is no longer running ahead of your life. It is finally walking beside it. And that quiet companionship with yourself is the most powerful sign that you are no longer just surviving. You are inhabiting your own existence. There is a different kind of time moving through you now. Not the urgent kind. Not the kind that pushes. But the kind that stretches gently, like light across a long afternoon. You begin to sense your life in seasons instead of emergencies, in cycles instead of crises. You stop asking what needs to be fixed right now and start wondering what deserves to be grown slowly. This is a quiet but radical shift, because for so long you were trained to react, to respond, to stay ready for impact. Now something else is guiding you. Patience, foresight, a deeper relationship with the future version of yourself. You no longer feel pulled into constant motion. You feel rooted. You start investing energy differently, not into proving that you are capable, but into building structures that support you when no one is watching. Your choices become less performative, less about image, less about speed. You think about sustainability in ways you never did before, not just financial, emotional, relational, physical. You notice how often your old life required you to patch things up, fix what broke, recover from what drained you, stabilize after each emotional storm. And now, you are choosing something more intentional. You are laying foundations instead of repairing damage, creating routines instead of surviving disruptions, designing a life that does not need constant recovery. There is a quiet maturity in this phase, not the kind that feels heavy, the kind that feels spacious. You stop shaping yourself around expectations that never truly fit. You stop shrinking or stretching to match someone else's rhythm. You begin honoring your own internal tempo, and that changes everything. You wake up with a clearer sense of what matters, not what is urgent, not what is loud, but what is aligned. You start asking different questions. Not how fast can I move, but how deeply can I stay? Not what will impress others, but what will keep me whole. Not what am I escaping from, but what am I intentionally creating? This is where real construction begins, not with big plans, but with small, consistent choices that respect your nervous system. You build habits that nourish instead of deplete, connections that feel reciprocal instead of transactional, dreams that feel steady instead of overwhelming. And for the first time, your future does not feel like a gamble. It feels like a collaboration between who you are now and who you are slowly becoming. Let me ask you something softly. If no one ever asked you to explain your life, what would you choose to keep exactly as it is? Because that answer reveals the architecture of your next chapter. You are no longer motivated by fear of falling behind. You are guided by a desire to remain present. You are not chasing stability. You are embodying it. You are not waiting for permission to rest. You are designing a life where rest is built in. You are no longer living to be impressive. You are living to be coherent. And that coherence feels like home. There is something deeply Aquarius about this evolution. The willingness to detach from outdated systems, to question inherited definitions of success, to imagine a future that is quieter, more humane, more conscious. You are not building a tower. You are building a habitat. A place where your thoughts can land without tension, where your body can exist without defense, where your relationships can breathe without pressure. This is not the end of survival. It is the beginning of authorship. You are no longer reacting to life. You are composing it. And the most beautiful part is this: nothing about it needs to be rushed. Because for the first time, you are not trying to arrive somewhere else. You are finally learning how to stay. And as this message slowly fades into the quiet, I want you to remember something simple but powerful. Nothing you are building right now is small, even if no one sees it, even if it feels invisible, even if it does not look impressive yet. The universe does not reward noise. It responds to coherence. Every time you choose calm over chaos, truth over performance, presence over pressure, you are already aligning with the version of yourself that your future is waiting for. And maybe that is the real financial news. Not money arriving from the outside, but value finally rising from the inside. Because the wealth you are cultivating now is not meant to be spent. It is meant to be lived. So tonight, Aquarius, when the world feels a little too loud, come back to your breath. Come back to your rhythm. Come back to the quiet intelligence of your own heart. You do not need to prove anything anymore. You do not need to chase what is not aligned. You do not need to become someone else to be chosen. You are already chosen by your own soul. And here's the soft invitation I leave with you. If this message resonated even a little, leave a comment and let this community know what you are building quietly in your life right now. Not to show off, but to anchor it into reality. Subscribe if you want to keep receiving these cosmic transmissions. This space was created for thinkers, feelers, and visionaries who are done surviving and ready to build with intention. Trust yourself, Aquarius. The future you are sensing is real. It is responding to you, and this is only the beginning. The next message is already forming. The journey continues.